Content warning. This episode contains discussion of domestic violence, sexual trafficking, and murder.
Jessie always said she'd come home. Now, over 17 years after she vanished, her family is still waiting for her. Jessica Edith Louise Foster was a 21-year-old Canadian woman, described as vivacious and beautiful by those who knew her best. She grew up in Kamloops, British Columbia, and later on moved to Calgary. In 2005, she embarked on a trip to the United States. Then, seemingly on a whim, she decided to remain, staying behind with a man she called her fiancé in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Her loved ones back in Canada were concerned. They were deeply worried about the people surrounding Jessie, about what she was doing in Las Vegas. But Jessie reassured them by keeping in close contact. Until the spring of 2006. On March 28th of that year, Jessie called a relative from her residence on Cornerstone Place in North Las Vegas, Nevada. Her family never heard from her again.
Her so-called fiancé, Peter Bertrand Todd, later claimed that she left to go to a dentist appointment on April 3rd of that year. Her family dug into the circumstances of her disappearance, and what they found out confirmed their worst fears. Jessie had become a victim of sex trafficking. But it took Jessie's family years to get the police to take her disappearance seriously. Years later, her case has been linked to discussions of different alleged serial killers, including Neil Falls, the man who was shot and killed in self-defense after attacking a sex worker in West Virginia. And more recently, Rex Heuermann, the man accused of being the Long Island serial killer. Police also have looked into the possibility that her disappearance is linked to the vicious murders of other young sex workers in Las Vegas. But Jessie herself has never been found.
We were fortunate enough to connect with Glendene Grant, Jessie's mother. In the years since Jessie disappeared, Glendene has become a powerful anti-human trafficking activist. She founded Mothers Against Trafficking Humans, or MATH. She's tried to raise public awareness about the issue and help other families with loved ones who have been trafficked.
In this episode, we'll interview Glendene about the person Jessie was, her disappearance, other possibly linked cases, the Long Island serial killer, and more. My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases. We're The Murder Sheet, and this is...
The disappearance of Jessie Foster, sex trafficking, the Long Island serial killer, and the missing and murdered of Las Vegas. Talking to Glendene Grant, I was struck by what a lovely and pleasant person she is. She just sounded like one of those friendly people who can get even the most reserved individual to open up. Before our formal interview, we chatted a bit about her job, about how my name is pronounced, and about how her grandbabies are helping to keep her sane.
But Glendene's been put in a situation that few can imagine. Her daughter, Jessie Foster, disappeared in Las Vegas in 2006. There's been a spate of coverage around Jessie's case since the arrest of Rex Heuermann. He's been arrested for the murders of sex workers in Long Island, New York. Investigators are looking into possible connections between Heuermann and other cases, including the 2017 disappearance of Julia Ann Bean in South Carolina.
Authorities in Nevada have publicly confirmed that they are looking at Heuermann for the disappearances and murders of several sex workers in the Las Vegas area as well. The Las Vegas Review-Journal dug into property records, finding out that Heuermann owned a timeshare at Club de Soleil in the city, 3 miles from the famous Strip. He first bought that property in 2005, the same year Jessie Foster moved to the city.
Whether or not the cases are ultimately linked, Glendene has been determined to keep Jessie's name out there. That has been her mission for all these years.
Can you tell me a bit about your daughter, Jessie, her personality, and sort of what she's like?
Oh, Jessie, oh my gosh. Well, Jessie's my second born. My first 2 children were with Dwight, and then I have 2 younger children that I've had, with my husband, Jim. When Jessie was born, Crystal was only about 15 or 16 months old, so they were almost raised like twins when they were little. Jessie couldn't say Crystal initially, so she called her Dito. So to the very end, that's always been Crystal's nickname, Dito. As the other kids came along, she became a wonderful big sister. She was a super stepdaughter to my husband. As a matter of fact, she had him wrapped around her finger with little things like, Jim, if I can raise enough money to go on this vacation, would you go half with me? And he's like, definitely. And 2 weeks later, she said, yeah, but you've got to pay for it first, and I'll just repay you. So, she'd get, you can't say no now, and she was a real tomboy as a little one. So much so that our next door neighbors that we had for several years thought that I had 3 little girls and a boy named Jessie. And once I realized she thought that way, I had to say, no, Jessie's a girl. But she was always, had blunt, short haircuts and dressed, in long shirts and stuff. But as she started maturing and becoming more feminine in her ways, with her hair and her makeup, she just turned into the most stunning young woman that you would ever want to see. And she became a very popular young woman as she was leaving elementary school and going into junior high school. All my kids did their entire school years in the same elementary school that I went to, and then they went up to the same high school, junior high and high schools that I went to. So, the same neighborhood. They lived a block away from my mom and dad, and they grew up in the same house for their entire life. We lived in the same house from 1987 to 2012, actually. And so it was, everybody knew us. They knew, we had the home right across from the elementary school. She would bring all of her friends home at the end of school day. And as she got older, she started doing hair and makeup for her friends when they were going out to the movies or anywhere. They would all congregate at our home, and she could do anything. She had the best curling iron and the nicest makeup, and she just had that knack that I know I never had. Then as she was finishing grade 10 in Kamloops, she came to me with this idea that she would like to go move to Calgary, Alberta, where her dad and stepmom and stepsisters lived. We talked about it in great detail, and she had a really good reason why she thought that she should do it now, because she only had grades 11 and 12 left, and then she would be on to adulthood. And she said, Mom, I've never lived with Dad as a kid. I've visited him. I've had extended vacations, but I've never lived under the same roof as my dad my whole life, and I would really like to. And so we talked with her dad. He thought it was a good idea, so we packed her up and she moved to Calgary. I hated it, but luckily we were at the beginning of times of things like MSN Messenger, so she could be in the other room on the computer, talking from Calgary to one of her sisters, and I could hear her, and I just felt like she was still in the house. The internet really did change things a lot. And she said, if I like Calgary, I'll stay on for grade 12. If I don't like Calgary, I will come back to Kamloops and graduate with kids that I went to school with since kindergarten. Well, she loved Calgary, so she stayed on. We went out there for her graduation. being from Kamloops, it was the biggest graduation I'd ever been to. There was, a couple of thousand people that were graduating that year from that school. Then over time, she stayed in Calgary and she got a job and she got an apartment and just continued to live there. About 2 years after she graduated, she decided she was going to come back to Kamloops. She put everything she owned into storage and came back to Kamloops, moved back into her old room and she got 2 jobs. But some really strange things started happening after she came home. She was getting phone calls from a young man that she just called Dom. We actually thought she was saying Dom with an M. And it turned out that it was Don with an N. His name was Donald. But she kept talking about this guy, Donald. He was only a friend. And he kept wanting to take her on a vacation.
That man is named Donald Vaz. Glendene said that in Canada, his family has been linked to the sex trade.
He said everything would be free on her end. And I had this undying thought that nothing is free, and I was not comfortable with any of this. But, to be honest, she was 20 years old and had fared very well, in her entire life. So she ended up going on this trip down to Fort Lauderdale. She, kept in touch, and when she came back, she had wonderful pictures. To be honest, it looked like a really fabulous vacation. And so I kind of relieved. And then a few weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later, she said, Mom, Don wants to take me on another 3 trip. And I was like, no, something's going on. She said, no, he's taking me to Atlantic City. We're going to go to Manhattan. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. This was in May of 2005. Jessie was still 20. Her 21st birthday was coming up on the 27th of May, 2005. So she was down there. She wasn't even old enough, like I say, at still 20 years old. She wasn't old enough to go to clubs or anything like that, but she still enjoyed herself. And then the night before she was coming home, she called me, and she was quite frantic during this phone call, which worried me. And she said, Mom, I can't believe it. Don just told me he had, lost a bunch of money at the casino, and now he didn't even have enough money to get us home, like for food and stuff. And he asked me if I would prostitute myself to get some money for them to get home. She, I was taken aback, but, I wasn't actually shocked as much as I should have been, only because I had some underlying suspicion that there's no such thing as a free tip and that something wasn't right. Jessie was just really upset that he would assume that she wouldn't be offended by that. And now I'm all concerned. She's in New York State. I'm in British Columbia. We're not even in the same country, and we're on the opposite end of North America. So I'll tell you, I was so upset. I kept saying, well, what are you going to do? Go get another room. And just get yourself to the airport in the morning. Jessie says to me, Mom, I'm not afraid of him. I'm going to go back to my room. I'm going to get all my stuff, and I'm going to see you tomorrow when I get home. And so barely slept. But in the morning, she called me. And she was all chipper. She was herself again. And I, was like, oh, phew, kind of thing. And she goes, I'm still here with Dawn. We're actually going to go to Las Vegas. We're not coming home. We're going to Las Vegas. And I'll call you when I get there. I was in full-fledged panic within, 10 seconds. We all know Sin City and what it's famous for. I know what she told me the night before, and I didn't know why she didn't remember that. I didn't know why she had to, suddenly change her plans. Obviously, I found out later, because as it turned out that Jessie was at that point trafficked. she was being taken to Las Vegas, and she wasn't telling us anything because that's what she was told not to do. And so when she, and to be honest, I don't even know if she knew quite yet the trap that was just ensnaring her, to be honest. I'm maybe a little dramatic, very protective of my kids, so I immediately went to the worst case scenario. But she got to Las Vegas, she called, and everything seemed fine. She's like, this is wonderful. I'm going to stay here until my birthday. I'm going to celebrate my 21st birthday. It was 2 weeks away. At this point, when they got to Las Vegas, it was May 13th. 2 weeks exactly till her birthday, I tried to convince her to not do that. But she said, I'll call you tomorrow. And every day was the same thing. I'd try and get her to come home. And at the end of every call, she'd say, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And then, after the birthday, I'm saying, okay, it's time to come home. She's saying to me now, I was in a car accident with my friend that I just met here, and we were T-boned by a taxi cab, and now we have to wait. There's insurance and court. And I'm like, this isn't real, And then after a while, she stopped talking about the accident and the insurance and started talking about a man she met. And then she started talking about this man, Peter, and how she was in love with him.
As we mentioned at the top of the episode, that man's name is Peter Bertrand Todd.
And then it got to, she was moving in with him. And I couldn't get it through her head that you don't just go to another country and decide you're going to stay there and just move in with somebody. That's not how it works. But, next thing we know, she and Peter are engaged, and they were supposed to come to Kamloops. Like, she's been there since May, and now she's like, I'm going to bring Peter to Kamloops so you can meet him. And they were supposed to come in September. So at that point, she'd been there from May to September, talking to somebody every day, if not me, one of her sisters or one of her close friends, but pretty well every single day she talked to somebody. I realized later that was more probably for her protection, because to be honest, when the communication stopped, we knew immediately because of how close it was. So then September comes and she tells us that she had fallen and broke her jaw, and she was in the hospital and she couldn't come. And Peter was so sad. He was looking forward to meeting us, but she couldn't. They couldn't come now because she had, to see the doctors and stuff. And then time kept going, the same type of thing, we're in love, we're living together, and he's wealthy. She told us that his family were owned, many McDonald's restaurants in New Jersey and New York, and that they were in and all around New York, and they were very wealthy. And him and his twin brother were trust fund babies, so they just lived off of their parents' trust fund. So that's why he didn't have to work. That's why he was just into race cars, and he had a garage and he fixed race cars. But she would say it's really weird that garage where he fixed race cars didn't have any parts or motor oil on the floor. It didn't make sense to her. And then she finally started talking about coming home for Christmas, because at that point we were literally ready to go down and bring her back, to be honest. She said, I'll come home. I'll be home for Christmas. I'll come to Kamloops. I'll come early, and then I can go to Calgary, and then I can come back. Her sister's birthday was on the 19th, and your sister's birthday. And then so she did. She came back, but what we noticed, and even in Calgary, her dad and stepmom noticed, is that every night she was on the phone with Peter, and they would be fighting. And by fighting, I mean yelling and screaming and swearing at each other. And so over time, we started thinking that this has to be it. She's not going to go back when that's how their life is, just fighting. And so, we were getting ready. Katie's birthday was actually on the 8th. And then She was spending a lot of time with, a bunch of her friends here in Canada. And then Christmas Day, we got up, opened gifts, and she said to us on Christmas morning, I'm going to need a ride to the airport at 2:00. I'm flying back to Las Vegas today. And of course I said, no, you're not. She goes, I am. I said, well, no, otherwise, you don't just decide you're leaving on Christmas Day and leave and not tell us in advance. And she still wouldn't hear anything of it. And so we dropped her off at a little airport here in Kamloops at 2:00 on Christmas Day. And, we said our goodbyes. And as we watched her turn to go into the secure part of our airport, she turned around. She caught our eyes. My older daughter, Crystal, told me that there was a look on her face that she didn't quite get. And then after Jessie went missing, she said she got it. She said, Jessie looked at her big sister, with a look that just said, don't let me go. But Crystal didn't know that, and we think Jessie was too afraid to not go back. One thing we've learned about is the type of human trafficking that happened to Jessie. It's called love bombing. There's even a chapter in the book by Benjamin Perrin. He's a University of British Columbia law professor, and he wrote a book many years ago called The Underground World of Human Trafficking, and it's about human trafficking in Canada. And Jessie's chapter is actually called Love Bomb, and it's where they choose a woman and they decide that they're going to turn her into a prostitute. So they woo her, they wine her, they dine her, they treat her like a queen, which is exactly what Peter did. There was nothing that was too lavish for her, everything. And then they get information. If you think about it, when we're falling in love with somebody, we're opening our entire lives up to this person, and we're telling them about our life, our life, about our family, about our mom and our dad and our friends and our sisters. And then once they have everything they need, then it's, now you owe us. And this is when they take that information and they say, you do that, or, we know your little sister and we know where she lives. We know your best friend and we know where she lives. And we will just replace you. And nobody ever told us that's what happened to Jessie, but everything that happened and everything we had found out shows that Jessie was love bombed. And as it turns out, her jaw was not broken by her tripping on the sidewalk. It was actually broken by a fist. Peter broke her jaw. It was another way that they kept her in line. He actually had a wife that Jessie thought was an ex.
Back then, she went by Patricia or Trish Michelle Van Arsdale. She also went by the name Sierra.
They would gang up on Jessie. They would trap her in the bathroom while the wife beat her up. They would meet her in the parking lot of the escort agency where she was forced to work. And they would threaten her if she didn't go into the building. And it just went on and on. And so when Jessie went home on Christmas Day, we know it was by threat. I have since talked to many people. One of them was the woman who ran the escort agency that Jessie was forced to work at. And the reason that I was able to do that is Jessie's phone bills all came to my address. And after Jessie went missing, I opened every one of them. And most of us back in those days of getting a phone bill in the mail, it would just be, in a business-sized envelope folded in 3, and maybe 2 or 3 pages long. Once Jessie was in Las Vegas, her phone bills were 10, 12, 14 pages long, and they were too thick to fold, so they came in a big envelope the size of the sheet of paper, and they had hundreds and hundreds of phone calls on them. And we spent a lot of time. Like, I had a troop around me of friends and family, and we did so much investigation on our own. We phoned back every number. We looked for the numbers that were called the most. And as it turned out, I got a hold of the escort agency. And the escort agency woman told me that she told Jessie, little girl, you don't belong here. You need to go home. This is not you. You are not like this. I don't know why you come in here. And Jessie opened up to her, and Jessie told her that she was being forced. And but people in Las Vegas know that there's not a lot that they can do when people are being put in a situation like this. They have to fear for themselves. This woman even tried to buy Jessie a plane ticket back to Canada, but she was still too afraid to go. So then, after there was a time frame between when Jessie got back from Kamloops to Las Vegas in December, and she kept talking to us again every day until March of 2006. At that time, her older sister was making a plan to come down to Las Vegas, and they had an itinerary set up of all the things that Jessie was going to take her around to do and show her. And on the 28th of March, they ended their phone call with, okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow, and I'll see you in a couple of days. And when they hung up the phone that night, Jessie has never been heard from and has never been seen again since. And we kept trying to reach her for days. Crystal's trip, just inevitably was canceled. And it took us until from March 29th to April 9th to actually get the police to take a missing persons report on her. And they never took it seriously. They blamed her, thought that she was just a dumb Canadian who thought she could come be a prostitute in Las Vegas and get away with it. And they would hear nothing about, human trafficking, because they would literally say, she went missing from North Las Vegas, not Las Vegas. So they would literally say, that doesn't happen here. It happens on the Strip. And we just knew we had a brick wall. And since then, it only was about a year ago, after 17 and a half years, it was only maybe a year and a half ago that we finally got a detective on her case that is taking it seriously, that believes everything we tell him, and is actually working to help solve this case. We've spent a decade and a half with no help at all from the North Las Vegas police. We had help from police all over the United States when we would get tips that she was seen here and she was seen there, and we would call the police and they would check it out. But North Las Vegas did nothing other than blame Jessie for her own disappearance.
Jesus.
So it's been quite the ride, I guess you could say. It's been quite the ups and downs, but we have never stopped.
I'm so sorry, Glendene, that this happened, and not only that this happened, but then that you received so little help from the agency tasked with protecting people in that area for so long.
It just didn't make sense that they didn't want to help, but we started realizing things. I mean, I had to stop, getting upset because other people weren't doing what I thought they should, like the police investigating, for instance, and just be grateful for what we did get. So I stopped, literally worrying about what didn't happen. And if the North Las Vegas police weren't going to help, someone would help. So I had to just refocus on what you expect to be done, and just do what you could do. I just started my coping by reaching out to media and getting her attention everywhere. She became very well known in the media quite early on, because in 2006, human trafficking was still not quite in the forefront of the media yet. Nobody really understood it. And I myself even would say, my daughter Jessie was forced to Las Vegas and beaten and made to work at an escort agency. And when she was going to leave, she went missing. And I would use those words, all those words, to describe what happened to her for quite a while. Until one day somebody said to me, you do realize you've just described human trafficking. You've just described modern day slavery. And once I realized that I had, and I started looking into it, and I started focusing on agencies and help in that way, so much more opened up for us, including, books, magazines, articles, TV. I was taken down to New York and I was on the Montel show. Her story was told on Maury Povich. Like her case was told on, not her exact story, but her case was mentioned on America's Most Wanted. So, she's got quite a bit of attention. But never enough. Never enough.
Absolutely.
Over time, her case and the cases of 3 other women who were missing out of Las Vegas and were actually found deceased. And they started calling them, there are 4 women from Las Vegas. Jessie just hasn't been found yet. We just haven't found her body yet, is sort of how they say. But when things happen, they connect our girls together. And I do call them our girls. In respect, I have been in touch with all their families, like Lindsay Harris and Jody Brewer and Misty Sains. All 3 were found. They were actually found in different states. They were found dismembered and wrapped in bags, which is where we're going to be leading into the Gilco beach similarities, as that's how some of them were found. So one was found off a highway in California, one was found off a highway in Nevada, and one was actually found off a highway in Illinois. She was found, Lindsay Harris's legs were found 3 weeks after she went missing in 2005, but was not identified until just a few years ago. She went missing out of Las Vegas. So
let's quickly recap those other cases. Back in 2008, the Las Vegas Review-Journal ran an article indicating that police were investigating the possibility of a connection between 4 different cases: Jody Brewer, Lindsay Harris, Jessie Foster, and Misty Sains. Each one was involved in sex work.
25-year-old Misty Sains vanished from Las Vegas in 2003. Her remains were found later that year off of State Route 159 in the Nevada desert.
19-year-old Jody Brewer went missing on August 14, 2003. She was seen leaving the Harbor Island Club apartments in Las Vegas and getting into a white car with California plates, according to the Las Vegas Sun. On August 29th of that year, her remains were found in California's San Bernardino County, off a highway.
21-year-old Lindsay Harris went missing a little less than a year before Jessie Foster. She vanished on May 4th, 2005, from Henderson, Nevada. On May 23rd of that year, her severed legs were found off Interstate 55, not far from Springfield, Illinois. The fact that this string of murders happened not long before Jessie's disappearance means that it is possible that she fell prey to a serial killer. But it's also possible that someone closer was behind her vanishing.
Glendene said that in her mind, those who were around Jessie at the time of her disappearance were never truly called to account. She said that Todd was barely investigated. Back when Jessie first disappeared, police took so long to look into him that he had plenty of time to clean things up. She said they characterized him as cooperative because he left some keys in the door to his property so that police could look inside. She noted that Todd would not even meet with her when she came to Las Vegas, until, that is, she threatened to come back with more media.
As far as Glendene knows, Todd is still in Las Vegas. She said that he had a young son who was 5 when Jessie vanished. Glendene wonders if, now that Todd's son is a grown man, he might be able to come forward someday with what he saw or heard years ago. That possibility gives her some hope. Either way, Glendene is not dedicated to one theory or another in her daughter's case. She just wants justice and some answers. She stands in solidarity with the families of the other victims in Las Vegas and other families that have dealt with similar tragedies.
We are all just grateful for anything that we can get to help raise awareness and bring some kind of justice to these women. And they were robbed. They were all 20, 21, 22 years old, their early 20s, and they never got a chance. Well, I mean, whether you choose prostitution or you're forced into prostitution is not for me to decide what's right or wrong. Many people have to make that choice. But being beaten and being killed should never be part of any job that anybody should hold.
Absolutely.
And I just spent my whole I was 48, I think, when Jessie went missing, and I'm going to be 66 this year. So, you know, it's changed. It's changed everything, you know. My oldest daughter, her dad and Jessie had the same dad, Dwight. You know, he's never believed that Jessie was alive all these years. I pretty much have believed she is, or at least kind of hope she is. And in some ways, I hope that she's not alive, so she's not being abused. But her dad always felt that she was killed, and he died in 2020, and then my oldest daughter Crystal died in 2021, and I've actually been able to, in many ways, get some solace in knowing that if Jessie is not alive, the three of them are together. Dwight had no other children but those two girls, and it actually helps me get peace to think that they're all together. So I have slowly in my brain, because my heart still doesn't quite want to accept it, but in my brain I have accepted that Jessie is deceased, and she's with her dad and her sister now, and I'm going to do the legal declaring her deceased in the next bit. I just haven't. It's been a while, and I should have done it a year or 2 years ago, but it is time. Jessie deserves it. Dwight deserves it. He's always felt it in his heart. And that's just where I'm going to go now. I'm going to have her declared deceased, and I'm just going to keep going on. She needs to be found either way. I don't care right now. People say, I don't care if they're alive or dead when we find them. And then when we find them and they're not alive, it's really devastating. But, I'm ready. I'm ready to be told her remains have been found, if that's where we're headed. Because I just don't want her to be missing anymore. I don't want my grandchildren to have an aunt that they love with their entire being that none of them have ever met before. It's time.
I have a few follow-up questions for you, Glendene, about her disappearance, the circumstances, and then one thing I was curious is, I know with human trafficking, sometimes drugs are used to control the victims, and sort of, they get you hooked on something, and then you're stuck with them, essentially. Do you believe that was happening to Jessie?
Well, I have been known to say I kind of hope that she was giving something to numb the pain, if that doesn't sound too crazy.
No, I understand that, yeah.
I mean, it's not just, because it's not just to control them so that once they're addicted, they have to stay because you supply them. But it also numbs the brain. And if that's what it took, but I do believe that is very, very likely. And the physical violence, the beating her, the woman I mentioned from the escort agency saw Jessie's hand bleeding from where her hand was cut by the human trafficker's wife, and her jaw's broken. There's hospital records. She was arrested for solicitation of prostitution in Las Vegas more than one time, and anyone who knows Jessie, Jessie didn't do drugs. Jessie didn't smoke cigarettes. Jessie was a clean cut. She's one of those beautiful young women that you see that, is very conscientious of her appearance and her health, and her family came first. So there's just so many things that have. Like, just basically, to be honest, what I have to say is we just had to be able to wrap our brain around that this has happened to our girl.
Mm-hmm.
And then we understood all the things that happened. I started my organization called MAM, Mothers Against Trafficking Humans. And I've used that to travel all over Canada to give talks to different organizations, to schools, to groups on human trafficking and missing people. I've done some work with the missing and murdered Indigenous women up here in Canada. Gone on several of the memorial walks that they have every February 14th here in British Columbia in several cities. And I've tried to guide other families go through something that they have no idea how to get through. And I know that I got through it because I had a lot of support, and not everybody does. Not everybody has a huge family and tons of friends and a city behind them, and two countries. A lot of people say that Jessie's disappearance happened right at a time where this is where missing people started getting in the news finally, and I am just so grateful that. If that is true, then I'm very grateful that it happened when it did, because if we couldn't prevent it from happening, we needed to make sure that her name was out there and that her disappearance might help other people.
Absolutely.
I know her disappearance has helped other people. And do you want to know something?
Yeah.
I came to this conclusion a few years ago, and it's going to sound really weird, and I'm not a martyr, and I'm nothing like that. I am just as much a victim as Jessie is. But I had to stop wishing that she didn't go missing. And I did that for a long time. Oh, I wish this didn't happen. I wish things were different. My mother's words always, wishes were horses, beggars would lie. We all know that wishes don't on this country. So I had to stop wishing that she didn't go missing and be grateful for how many people's lives have been saved. How many women did not go missing, how many women were not murdered, and how many mothers did not have to live my life because they had heard about Jessie's case and they made other choices. Jessie and I are no more important than the next missing woman and the next woman's child, the mother of that woman, or anybody. And for me to keep wishing that Jessie didn't go missing would mean that hundreds of people's lives would have taken a different course and not a good one. So to me, I had to stop wishing this didn't happen and be thankful that it's helped hundreds, thousands of people to make other choices. And as strange as that sounds, I have stopped wishing it didn't happen.
I think it sounds very selfless. I don't think it sounds strange. And I'm sure those families appreciate the work that you've been able to do based on this horrible tragedy.
There are some parents who literally have died because they couldn't handle it. So my strength is something I'm of the utmost grateful for. One thing that I do say often is I am my mother's daughter. My mom, oh my gosh, she was the strongest woman. She passed away in 1998, so she didn't have to live through this. My dad passed away in 2011, but he used to drive me out to the airport and pick me up at the airport when I was traveling across the country to go get my talks. And so I know that he's very proud.
Yes, I imagine. Now that you have a detective on the case in Vegas who is sounds like they're committed and doing some good work, have there been any leads that came up for you that are especially interesting? I know right now there's a lot of talk about the Heuermann case out of New York, And I know you've actually talked to some of my old colleagues at Insider about that, but I'm wondering, any other things before we get into some of those cases that have come up that are high profile, any other things in Las Vegas that they're working on that you find promising?
Not really. I mean, there was, this isn't the only case that these cases have been brought to light through Las Vegas because of a connection to the person who committed the crimes. But anytime anything comes up, I've got so many people that have been supporting us. I get calls and messages. I even have certain media people down there that will message me, have you heard this? Have you heard that? So to me, it's just, through all the support we get, I just keep hanging on that, one day somebody's going to have the right thing to say to us, and it's going to take us finally in the direction that it's either lead to her remains or have proof that these guys did something to us.
Absolutely. Do you believe Jessie's case is definitely linked to those other girls in Vegas that you mentioned, or do you think it's possible that there's not a connection there?
I'm torn back and forth sometimes. There's been other times where they've been connected. I mean, years ago there was an FBI connection. They called it the highway serial killer. And if you look at their map on this, they got red dots of all the bodies all over, and then they've got our 4 girls as pictures from Las Vegas prominently out there because they suspected that. So things like that, where they think that Jessie was picked up at a truck stop by some trucker serial killer. When that happened, I had no belief in that. Jessie was not put into that kind of a situation where she would go to truck stops. When the other one with that Neil Falls, where he would call escort agencies, it seemed like there is possibly a closer connection, and same with this one from Gilgo Beach, possibly more because she was prostituted out of an escort agency. So it just seems that there is a chance that it's more likely. But I have one huge road bump with Jessie's case that the other cases don't have, because with Jessie's remains never being found, we don't have DNA of her somewhere that might connect her to somebody. So, they're not going to find something with her DNA. I guess that is possible. They could find something with her DNA on it in his possession, but chances are very likely that they're going to find something now with her DNA and the killer's DNA that will link them together. Her DNA is on file. Jessie's been on that NamUs website for so long that she was actually put on there when it was still just in beta, and her number is like 168 or something like that out of tens and tens of thousands of cases. So all of her information, fingerprints, pictures, everything is all available through the NamUs website. And but with the DNA part, it's hard for me to land on what I think. I change my mind way too often with this. I think, well, yeah, very likely could, but then I'm like, but then how would you know? And if it is, does that confusion make any sense to you? Like, so I jump back and forth as to what I believe.
I think that's probably an astute way to be, because you're, sometimes if you get convinced by one thing, then you're closing your mind to other possibilities that might fit the facts better. And so instead of just saying it has to be this, keeping an open mind sounds like, when all the facts are not known, sounds like the best way to deal with it.
Yeah. And I find like that is kind of the best way for me, just simply because, I think probably mostly because I see other cases and I'm like, okay, well, that is similar. And then I start thinking, well, if something like that happens. So, yeah, nothing is ever closed off to me. Nothing. I'm always willing to take a tip from anybody. Like we have, and you had actually asked also about if we've had any specific tips. Since this officer has been on the case now, this detective, and we had somebody that was trying to tell us that they knew exactly where her remains were buried in Henderson, and they were trying to get money out of us. And we were, I had somebody who was willing to take them the money that they wanted in Las Vegas. And then I told the officer about it. And what happened was, as soon as we told them we had somebody, they decided that they had to meet us in another state. Meeting in Las Vegas wasn't good enough. So, but this man, this detective, he did so much while we were going through that. They traced the phone number, they traced the email address. It was all through some other country that came through Chicago, of all places, and then it changed the IP address and did all, he checked all that out for us, and it turned out that it was nobody that we could track down, but it was also nobody that could have known the information. So you get led on all these different trails.
That just makes me so angry how sick someone has to be to do that to a family who's going through what your family's going through.
Happens all the time, right? I mean, look at how Natalie Holloway's family has been, ripped off for all that money by the person that did kill their daughter, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, their evil it actually doesn't surprise me anymore.
Yeah.
I do live in a nice little, I don't want to call it a bubble because I am open to, to keep my eyes open to things, but our little family, our little life, our little home, it's so safe and peaceful for us. I volunteer at the BMX club. I run their concession. I go with my granddaughter to our local hockey team's concession and work the concession at hockey games, and just try to be out there in the public. And working at the most popular bistro in Canada, it's never heard either, because there's a lot of people who come in here who know about Jessie's case. Right. And so it's always nice to know that, the case is still being talked about around town, and we're still raising awareness, all over. Nothing but respect for everybody that just wants to listen to us.
Absolutely. And then just, have you gotten any feedback from the Las Vegas detective on the possible Long Island link at this point, or are they still looking into it?
No, not at all. But I don't really expect to hear things from them per se, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't expect him to tell me stuff. All he did say was, because he's North Las Vegas, North Las Vegas police have talked to the Metro Las Vegas police, and it's the Metro Las Vegas police that are in touch with the Long Island police. And he said Jessie's name has been given to them. So they do have her information, but I haven't been given any other information on top of that.
That makes sense, but it's definitely it's being looked at.
Yeah. I was just grateful that he said that, they were giving her name. To me, that's like, that's like a billboard went up almost, kind of thing. It was fabulous. Yeah. It's things like that most people would never need to worry about, thank God. For us, getting the attention on Jessie, it's like a bonus. It's like, present, Yeah. Thank you. After all these years, thank you for still caring and wanting to hear about Jessie, and that goes to you too, especially,
Thank you.
It means a lot to me.
Well, I'm just so grateful that you were willing to come speak with me, and also just the advocacy and the work you've done for your daughter and for other people's daughters and other people's children in this situation is just incredibly admirable. And I really commend you for that. And I'm so sorry that you had to do this, but before we go, is there anything else that you think it's really important for people to know about Jessie's case, or about the issue of human trafficking, or just anything that you want the listeners to sort of leave with?
Well, kind of in a nutshell, I want people, men and women and children, to be very cautious of their surroundings, of the people that, they come across, keep their guards up. I come from a day and age I was born in 1957, so you can imagine I was born when it was still peaceful and we could, play outside, and then our kids could play outside. And now we're at a generation where, your kids can't go anywhere because you need to know who they're with and what they're doing. So I just want people to keep that safety in mind when they go places, not to walk somewhere alone, not to take a shortcut through any, dark alley or, and definitely a lot of people meet online, and you need to be very cautious, even if it's just a quick, Google or Facebook search to see, I tell a lot of teenagers this, you meet a guy, he seems sweet, go to his page, and if he's, putting down women or talking negatively about things, and, he's probably got other things going on about him that you might want to, avoid, so it just, that's basically all I do now is just try to help people stay safe and be aware of all their surroundings. Even me, when I walk home, I walk to the parkade after work every day. I'm downtown. We're not like it used to be when I was a child here. And, I'm walking past people smoking out of meth pipes and hanging around in groups, going through garbage bins. And I only have to go half a block to the parkade. So to me, just thinking of young people going anywhere and having to pass all of this, it's hard. So I try to make sure that they stay in groups and just to stay safe. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't keep your headphones on walking down the street at night by yourself. It's very repetitive, but it's the most important thing. It's just to keep yourself safe.
Before you go, please click on the link we've included to Jessie's Charley Project page. That includes plenty of photos of her. If you visited Las Vegas in the early to mid 2000s and perhaps saw her or interacted with her, we want to know about it. We protect our sources. Thanks so much to Glendene for sharing her experience and insights with us. We think the work she's doing for other families in crisis is inspiring.
And thanks also to Brian, who recommended this case to us. We appreciate him very much. Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.